Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to The Breakdown. It's Electric Docs TV, and we're here with Dr. Amsu, Dr. Amu, and yours truly, Mr. Breaks. And it's a tragic one, folks. Our superhero has fallen to a mortal disease. You know, the death of Chadwick Boseman to colorectal cancer.
Black Panther.
Black Panther, guys, is absolutely tragic. And unfortunately, you know, the mortality from this disease is increasing, especially amongst African-American people. And his death, again, unfortunately, sort of reignites the conversation into those disparities in health between African Americans and the rest of the population. Tragedy, folks. So listen, Electric Docs, of course, want to lend their voices to this conversation. You know what we do. We're all about health. We're all about the advocacy of black health. And so we'd be reticent to not lend our voices to this. So again, I'm going to introduce the docs. Dr. Amsu, Dr. Amin, what's up, fellas?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on?
Absolutely, absolutely. So listen, let's just get straight to this. Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, you know, our hero, dies to colorectal cancer, of which he suffered for 4 years, and
right.
you know, he hadn't announced it, which is something else we could talk about as well. You know, people sort of, I wouldn't say he's suffering in silence. I think he obviously knew, and he had the wherewithal to, you know.
He was going through all kinds of therapy at the time. So,
right.
You know, he was suffering in silence.
In silence.
You know, he didn't let anybody know what was going on. And it's really tragic, you know, it shocked the world.
Yeah.
Shocked the black world.
And he's very young. And I think, you know,
43.
43. He was diagnosed at what? Must have been in his late 30s. So
I like what you did there with the maths there.
yeah.
I saw his eyes going to and fro.
You know, but again, like you said, it is suffering in silence. And I mean, that could be for a number of reasons because of his status and his professional
Well, I think so, not just to correct you, but I don't think it's necessarily suffering in silence. Like I said, he knew he had the wherewithal to manage it.
Right.
So he was really either probably shielding us from that information,
Exactly.
right? And just handling it. You know, I don't know Chadwick or didn't know Chadwick Boseman personally. So people deal with these things in different ways, you know. And so, but again, it really does highlight that. So let's jump right in, guys.
All right.
So colorectal cancer. Give us a breakdown of what colorectal cancer is.
Well, the colon, I mean, colorectal cancer is cancer of the lower intestine, which is known as the colon.
Right.
And it's the final part of the digestive tract or digestive system. And the rectum is basically attached to the sigmoid colon, and that attaches to the anus. So basically, colon and rectum are put together for colorectal cancer because it's usually, you know, those it involves the same tissue. You know, and how it starts, it basically starts with a non-cancerous growth called a polyp. So polyps are known as polyp adenomas, right?
Adenomas, yeah.
And people are tested for these polyps, and you know, everybody, or basically half of everybody at some point in their life is going to develop a polyp. So it's about detecting polyps and finding out whether they're benign or malignant.
Right. So I've read some stats, of course, and that, you know, the death rates from colorectal cancer are extremely high. So it's one of those diseases that, you know, the mortality rate, again, is very high. So the survivability rate is very low, right? But how does colorectal cancer start? Where does it start from? Not so much getting causes, but, you know, you just talk briefly about, so there's the polyps.
Well,
right, and,
one
let me just say the polyps usually develop, you know, over between 10 and 20 years. So it takes time. It's not an overnight situation that bang, you got a polyp, bang, you got colorectal cancer.
Right.
It's something that is fed over time that, you know, will become more, you know, develop from being benign into, you know, a malignant tumor.
Sure.
So it's not overnight.
And so obviously polyps being in the colon, you're not going to see them. So what are the symptoms that most people are going to face?
Right. So one of the persistence changes you will find is things within your bowel movements, right? So within your stool, you could start seeing blood. You know, that's one of the early stages. Also suffering things with like constipation, diarrhea. Even when you're having bowel movements, not actually feeling empty. You know, like when you have a good bowel movement and you feel whoa.
A colossal.
Colossal,
right? Like I'm out, like
a log.
I've just lost 10 pounds there. 10 pounds later.
Right.
So not feeling that you've actually emptied. Abdominal pain, all right, around the lower abdominal.
A lot of flatulence.
Feeling gassy, fatigue, weight loss. And we saw that with the young brother. He started to drop weight tremendously, and a lot of us thought maybe it was for an acting role or something like that. So with unexpected weight loss, weakness, fatigue, you're not feeling your strength, you're not feeling, exuberant as you should be. So these are some of the symptoms that, you could be mindful, but one of the main things is actually looking at your stool. Because of the large intestine and the rectum and where it's coming from, is actually seeing blood, diarrhea, inconsistency, constipation, things like that.
Right. And we're going to probably talk about the stigma later on, but a lot of people don't look at their stool, they don't look at their mucus when they sneeze, and these are all signs, right? So absolutely. I know when I sneeze, if I see yellow, I'm getting a cold or something. Right. Like that. I know, if I feel a little bit malaise, it kind of reinforces that. So people need to get into the habit, right, of looking at their stool.
Right, examine the stool. We don't mean go in there with your hands and stuff like that. Get the rubber gloves on. No, just have a look, have a little peek back. Quick one in case anyone's watching.
There you go. Right.
But take a peek and examine to see if there's white in there, see if there's blood in there, see if there's any mucus. And also what we encourage all our clients is look at the consistency. To know whether you are, common practice is to find out if you are dehydrated, if you're producing a log, or if you're producing little plops, whatever, or if it's runny, if you've got consistent diarrhea and whatnot, that means you have a problem. So, people have to get into the habit of looking at their, basically looking at their shit.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So Chadwick Boseman is 43 years old, right? Very young. Caught the world by surprise. Now I know my health company that my company was linked to. They tend to offer screening for free, right? Once you hit 50. But we're seeing younger and younger people. So what are the factors? What are sort of demographic age groups, people who are affected by this? Really, right?
It's supposed to be older people. Right. It's more constant in men. Older guys, if you have family history of something, right. Which there's no hereditary. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. So if your family practices certain eating habits and whatnot, you're going to follow the same kind of thing. If you have a history of IBS, inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD, IBS, obesity. Yep. If you have diabetes, you're more at risk, diabetes mellitus, or type 2 diabetes. So if you smoke, if you drink alcohol, if you have the party type attitude, it catches up with you as you get older. It weakens your whole consistency.
And a lot of people don't understand as well, consuming large amount of processed food, red meat, inconsistency of exercising. When I say, exercise, and I'm talking everyone going to the gym to try to be an athlete, but just simply, 20, 30 minutes at a time, whether you're walking around the park, doing a bit of skipping, riding bikes, as we do.
Yeah.
Simple things in life will make a big change.
So I'm pretty sure we're going to get to some of those solutions and the lifestyle change you can make. But just to sort of, talking about this again, the shock that, Chadwick Boseman, other than being sort of, this global superstar, at the age of 43, right? As you said, he's contracted this in his 30s, extremely young. So who is at risk in terms of, we've talked about, it's supposed to be something that older people contract, as they get older because of the accumulation of these toxins over time. Younger people are getting it now. So you talked about the smoking, the drinking. Right. But let me ask this. What are the survival rates?
First of all, who's at most risk?
Right.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
African Americans,
right.
Or black people, right, are most at risk.
And any other race on the planet.
Right? So when you're dealing with any form of cancer, they have what is called the 5-year survival rate.
Right.
So what are your chances of surviving for 5 years after you've been diagnosed, right? So with African Americans, the survival rate is 51%.
Wow.
Compared to 61% when you're dealing with white people.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. And that's 10% difference. You see what I'm saying? That's
a lot of people.
Massive. That's
significant.
That's a significant amount. You know, and colorectal cancer is the second most killer of people in the world.
Right.
Wow.
You know, it's the third most amount of people with cancer, but it kills just less than people with lung cancer. You know, lung cancer is number one. That's the number one killer, number one in thing. But colorectal cancer, it kills the most people. So one of the things is that the time when you're diagnosed is very key. So if you catch it at stage 1, the survival rate is in the 90th percentile. Stage 2, if it moves into the lymph nodes or into the lymph, it's at like 68%. But if it's stage 3, it's metastasized, you're looking at 10%, only a 10% survival rate. So the screening,
yes,
the time when it's caught, that's key to whether you're going to survive or not. And that's probably why the mortality amongst African Americans is higher.
I mean, the interesting point is that in many cases of colon cancer, there's no symptoms in the early stages. There's no symptoms, and that's what makes it dangerous. It all depends on the size of the cancer, where the cancer is located in the large intestines. And again, just to back up what Dr. Amsu was saying, the screening is very important because you might not be having any symptoms, but cancer is developing. And then before you know it, we get screened, and we're told we're at stage 2, stage 3, and we didn't even know about stage 1.
And this is a fact. This year, or a statistic that we discovered was this year, CDC are expecting over 53,000 people to die of colorectal cancer.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's like a third, give or take, of the amount of people that's died with the current pandemic.
Pandemic, of course.
So that's some high numbers.
And just looking at some other statistics here, it's saying that, you know, 1 in 23, that's 4.4% of the population.
Yeah.
Well, for men.
For men,
and
right.
1 in 25, 4.1% for women will contract colorectal cancer at some point. Colorectal cancer accounts for 9% of cancer deaths in women and 8% in men.
Exactly.
Right? So again, these are very alarming numbers. And you talk about the 5-year survival rate, 90% for localized disease, 68% if the lymph nodes are involved, and then 10% if there are evidence of metastasis spread to the time of diagnosis. So let's talk a little bit more about the causes of colorectal cancer. Dr. Amsi, you were talking about, you know, Dr. Amsi, you talked about the high intake of starches, eggs, cheese, and meat increasing the risk of CRC. Let's discuss a little bit more about that. And
yeah, I mean, and I know Dr. Amsi's got something to say, but the funny thing is that, and I think what we're trying to do as electric dots is make people aware that food is your medicine, right? But at the same time, it could be your poison, right? And there is no condition or disease that you're suffering with or could experience to suffer with that is not related to food. So remember, you're stuffing food down the stomach, that's just like going into your stomach, your small intestine, and you're putting tons of food every day. You know, it'd be stupid not to think that this is not causing an effect on your organs and putting pressure. So when we're saying food is your medicine, we're really telling you, you know, be mindful of what you're eating. You know, some people don't want to be a plant-based or restricted as us, but when you're having things like starchy food and eggs and cheese and refined sugar and processed meat and especially red meat, you know, these are the things that add to these conditions. These are the things that have been known to now cause cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, inflammatory leaky gut syndrome, things of these natures that can lead to your death. So it's not, you know, it's not something that we should be taking lightly.
So when we're dealing with, you know, specifically red meat, because that's like the number one dietary substance that has led to, you know, that leads to people's CRC, colorectal cancer, right? So what it is when red meat is being cooked, right? We as black people, we love to cook up
Grill. Get on the grill, man.
Fry, whatever. We love our meat well cooked.
Barbecue.
But when meat is exposed, red meat is exposed to high temperatures, it produces two types of chemicals, right? There's heterocyclic amines, right, or HCAs, right, which, again, high temperatures brings this out of the meat, right? Then you have polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, right, PAHs, right, which PAHs are the most carcinogenic substance on the planet, hands down. So what happens is when you're grilling or frying red meat and it's at high temperatures, what happens is there's a juice or an oil that's produced from the meat that falls into the flames, and then the flames produces these PAHs.
Wow, look at that.
And then it comes back up into the meat, attaches to the meat. And then we love it. We love the taste. We love the grill. So imagine every holiday there is, when it ain't raining, what do?
Grilling, mate.
We start up the grill. And it's a common practice that, we as black people, if we do go to a restaurant and we want steak, how do we want it? How don't we want it?
We don't
want it rare. We don't want it medium. Or we want it well done to Charlotte, bun it up.
Cook through.
You know what I mean? So cook through. And it's at these temperatures when it's being cooked through that we're producing these substances that are carcinogenic.
And you know it's how the body now is metabolizing these chemicals, which then are going to lead to an inflammatory environment.
Right.
And that's what these chemicals cause within your large intestines. They're causing inflammation. They're building up.
Well, they're carcinogenic, so they're going to actually cause malignant tumors, which start with the polyps.
The polyps, right? Because polyps are a result of how much or how inflamed your large intestine is to begin with. So again, we can't escape these foods. We can't escape it.
So I got to attempt this. So polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, right? So you're saying things that get burnt, right? We know generally can be carcinogenic.
So you see when you're grilling meat, you actually see and we love to see it, right?
Describe it.
Succulent.
So
it's all so juicy. It's just dripping, right?
I mean,
so we love the. No, I'm remembering back in the day.
Allegedly,
allegedly, you sounded
like I haven't been electric all my life. You see what I'm saying?
Hey, but let me ask, can it be found in other foods? Is it just the red meat?
Yes, it can be found in if you're doing with fishes,
pork,
you know, anything that is grilled,
yeah.
There's a chance that you're gonna be producing PAHs.
Yeah.
Right, when you grill foods. So, and it's meat.
Right.
So you can get away with grilling like, you know, some people who are vegans, they'll grill like green peppers and all that kind of stuff. It's not gonna produce the same toxins.
No.
It's still, and it's also produced from tobacco smoking.
Yep.
Weed, hookah.
Well, not so much hookah because hookah doesn't reach to high temperatures because it's in water.
It's in the water.
But smoking any weed, any tobacco, and especially without filters on tobacco.
Right.
So people who are, you know, filterless tobacco, who like
roll-ups and
their buds and all that,
right.
Black and Miles and whatever.
Yeah.
You're exposing yourself to more PAHs.
Right.
So, you know, cigarette smoking increases your risk.
Wow. So, my maybe limited understanding, so that cancer is genetic. It's not just like inflammatory. I know there's inflammatory components we're talking about. We know about the toxins and the pollutants. But is there a link between, you know, the PAHs and like genetics? Is it somehow altering the genetics is causing this?
I mean, when we're talking about like epigenetics, we have to remember is how our body reacts and what genes will be expressed by the chemicals we're receiving from these foods. So absolutely. When we say it's not genetically or inherently passed down, we are more referring to like there's not actually like a gene and saying, bam, this is what's being passed on through your chromosomes and genetic. We're saying this is the lifestyle. So how your genes is going to be expressed through those chemicals. And like Dr. Hamsu was saying before, the food that your grandparents ate is what your parents are going to eat and you're going to eat.
So specifically with HCAs and PAHs, they are what we call mutagenic.
Right.
So they actually mutate your genes as you're inhaling them or you're consuming them, right?
Right.
And again, from meat, cigarette or smoking, car fumes. So as you know, the death toll has actually lessened since unleaded fuels.
Right, I was about to say, since the EPA.
Right? So EPAs around the world, different environmental protection
groups
agencies and whatever, they've actually done a good job in reducing the amount, because you used to be a lot more during the 70s and 80s, you know, but now it's a bit better. But unfortunately, when it comes to the meat consumption, because one of the problems with whenever we talk to people about their dietary habits, they're like, need my meat, where am I going to get my protein and such, and you know, and then you get bombarded with like the McDonald's and Burger King commercials where it's grilled and, you know, it's red meat and it's, you know, it's a symbol of almost like power and strength to eat meat, whereas, you know, you're some kind of sissy. You know, the image of a vegan back in the day was, you know, the lightweight,
airy,
you know,
and you know, one of the things we have to understand is
people,
that
you know,
this can, like you said, it alters our DNA,
right?
And that's where it becomes dangerous. That's where we now get exposed to diseases like, you know, cancer, anything else, because of the alteration of the DNA is a serious situation that we shouldn't be taking lightly. And you know, again, we just can't stress or get the point over enough about the food is your medicine.
Absolutely.
The environment.
So even when you're eating meat, red meat, it increases your chances of developing colorectal cancer by 33%. There's a 33% increased risk. So we're not anti, you know, telling people because we want to mess up your flavor or anything like that. It's like, look, this is about your health in the long term. So we always get people, no, well, I'm going to die happy. I'm going to eat my meat and die. Right. No, you will not die happy if you have colorectal cancer. You're going to die in pain.
Exactly. And then the alcohol intake. So what you find is that a lot of people will eat red meat and drink alcohol.
Of course.
Both of them are the perfect ingredients.
Burger and a beer.
Burger and a beer.
With some chips.
Right.
So you got to catch up on the mayo, my friend. But so I want to sort of bring it back to sort of the main theme here. And obviously that was, you know, one of the key points that was raised in terms of disparity, right? So why are African Americans particularly at risk from colorectal cancer? You know, we talked about the grilling, we get the meat, but are there any other factors that can contribute to
the obvious one? What everyone talks about is the socioeconomic.
Absolutely.
You know, there's we don't have money for insurance, and because, you know, black people are more associated with low income than white people.
Sure.
Let's just be true. Let's be honest. Let's just speak the facts, right? So we're not gonna go and get screened because
we won't have
you
the
know,
money.
especially black men, and we've been speaking about this for a minute, right? Black men don't like to get tested for anything.
Sure.
We don't want to go. We have a stigma with going into some kind of establishment where there's, you know, some kind of order, and you know, especially we're thinking, well, white people are going to be there prodding us and whatnot. And
I mean, historically, there's precedent to say that you know, you go into these establishments, you may not leave, and I know it's probably not the case now, but the stigma's still there.
And then we don't want nobody messing with our asses. We don't want nobody touching our batty. You know what I mean? Don't touch that.
Yeah.
You know,
genitals. Those
we don't want no one messing with our privates.
Male or female?
Male. I mean, it's the same.
Male or female doctor?
We don't care. Same thing we find with
female.
I've had both, you know, and it's.
You know what I mean? But generally, culturally,
yes,
we don't want anybody messing with our privates like that.
On a more, I would say, what is more predominant is the financial. It's even when people have Medicaid or insurance coverage, it doesn't cover it fully. And that's where we're at a disadvantage of.
Well, you know what's interesting, and probably one of the sadder facts as well about screening, is that with a lot of coverages, what they call preventative care is actually covered.
Right.
Sometimes 100%.
Right.
So depending if your doctor refers you, it may be free. But what it is, because of the stigma and because people are not asking, they're waiting
we're
to
not
be 50.
thinking about it.
Not thinking about it because, you know.
You know, that's another thing is the education. Education is key because as a young black man, you think you're invincible.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with me, and I'm gonna wait until I can't walk or it's unbearable before I even think about and this is one of the habits of black people. We frequent the ER more than anybody else because we wait until it gets to that emergency, urgent situation.
It's critical.
Either we're gonna flood the urgent care centers or we're in the ER because when we have a little twinge, it's like, ain't nothing, you know, a bit of gas or whatever, bit of blood in the stool, you know what I mean? Maybe I ate some ketchup and it's that ketchup. We create these excuses in our heads. So we wait until it's lastminute.com and this is the reason why it's killing us more than anybody else because it's usually stage 2 or stage 3.
Late. And again, going back to those socioeconomic factors, you know, one thing I've known for a long time, of course, is that, you know, most black people, especially historically in America, would have had, you know, blue collar jobs, right?
Right.
If you don't go to work, you don't get paid. So if you do have a twinge, you're not going to take the morning off or the day off work.
Right.
Especially if you're working in an area or an industry where if you don't turn up,
you could be
and
fired.
what's crazy about this country, you know, we grew up in the UK.
Yeah.
If you're sick, you're sick. You got time off. You're sick leave.
Yeah.
There was no limit.
Right.
Right? Over here, they tell you how many sick days you get.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I get 5
That's
to
a
10
great
sick
point.
days.
Yeah.
So man, I've you know, and a lot of the time when you chuck a sickie, like you couldn't be bothered to go to work. So you say, man, I'm not feeling well. You use it up.
Yeah.
So a lot of us black folk, we might use up our sick days on some bullshit. But now when we need it.
Yeah. But in real life and real practice, right, you know, a lot of us, you know, the three of us have all worked corporate, you know, we've all worked, I guess, white collar jobs to a degree, right? If you're working in a factory, you know, you're working in an industry whereby your physical presence is, essential to your job. And if you're not there, then, you know, wages are getting ducked and you've got your supervisor pressuring you. You get that twinge, you're more than likely just to go to work. Right. Less likely to go to the screen, regardlars of whether it's free or not, regardless of whether you have sick days.
You're going to go through the pain. You're going to ride through the pain.
So let me ask you this. You know, I know we're having a discussion about some other ailments. We're talking about environmental factors as well. What are the, you know, so we've got the meat, we've got the food, we've got, you know, all of the toxins, but what are some environmental factors that can contribute to cancers or colorectal cancer specifically?
Dirty water.
Yeah. Right.
Number one thing is water. You know, how pure is the water? Is it full of microbes, pathogens, you know, chemicals?
Well, we know.
You know, how pure is the water? So this is a thing where you have a lot of people still drinking tap water, right? You heard about Flint, Michigan, right? Well, the whole world heard about Flint, Michigan, but that's not an isolated case. That in a lot of places, you know, low-income places across the United States, that's usually the dumping grounds, whether it's factory or it's farmlands and whatever, where you're getting, you know, a lot of basically feces in the water.
Seeping into the water.
If you drive across this country and you drive through rural areas, there's certain areas where there's populations, but you can actually smell shit in the air.
Absolutely.
You can smell it. It's thick. So this is what people are drinking. When you're drinking, you know, and there are, you know, the EPA actually allow, you know, certain parts per million
of course,
of feces that's allowed in your water before it's like, no, that's
and in your
much.
food, and in your meat.
And in your meat, and everything. So it's like, it shouldn't be allowed at all. It should be like 0 parts per million of shit in my food or my drink. But, you know, it's allowed. So
go ahead.
So in low-income areas, we're finding that there's more pollutants, more chemicals, and you know, cheaper housing. And again, where you find cheaper housing, right? Somebody who needs a house, you're homeless, you need a house.
You're gonna get what
you're gonna get what you can afford.
Yeah.
So you're not thinking about
lead paint,
you know,
asbestos,
how good is the air?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? You just know, right, there's a bad smell around where I live.
Where the house was built, what land was built on. It was built on a
60%
landfill
of them
or
houses
something.
will have mold. Mold is a factor to a lot of these health, from arthritis to cancer to diabetes, respiratory dysfunctions. You know what I mean? Mold plays a major factor in that, and that's what you will find in a lot of the lower end urban communities of housing. So we're at a disadvantage when we look at it. If we're just being real, we're just at a disadvantage from so many different angles. You know, we're fighting so many different adversities for our health and our well-being, our survival. Let's just be real. We're trying to survive here.
Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly, let's get an overview. You know, we touched a little bit. I know you mentioned the smoking. You know, we've gone over the meat. We've battered the meat. We've tenderized the meat. Put it on the grill.
Yeah, minimum exercises. You know,
the other lifestyle. So we're talking about so the average person. So now we're more sedentary, right? It's interesting. Through the COVID virus, more and more people have decided, well, I want to work from home. That means they're obviously not doing menial work. They're obviously not doing things where they have to be physically on site. That means more of us are sedentary, right?
Right.
So that's got to be a factor as well, isn't it?
Of course. You know, the sedentary lifestyle means that your lymphatic system is not operating for all of your day, because sedentary lifestyle, people who work in offices and such, you wake up out of your bed, you're lying down, lymph is not moving.
Right.
You get up, you may walk a few yards, go and sit down on the toilet, right? Then you go into the shower, you stand up, that's probably the most movement you're gonna get. It's like you're washing yourself, but then you sit in a car or on a bus, whatever, go to work, and you sit at a desk for the whole day. So there's zero or minimal lymphatic, right? Or sitting at home.
You're just sitting at home. You're not even.
And you know, so your lymphatic system is not moving about, because your lymphatic system needs movement in order for it to circulate. It's not like your circulatory system where your heart is pumping blood. This is only moved when you move. So another factor as well is vitamin D deficiency. So people who stay inside, right? And what is it that has been the constant since this whole pandemic?
People are indoors.
Stay at home.
Stay at home.
You're being told, stay at home. No, don't go outside unless stay at home. So people are staying in their houses, and vitamin D deficiency was already a pandemic across the world, right? Was already a pandemic. It's even worse now. Vitamin D helps to is a very powerful anti-carcinogen, right? Very powerful. So with you not getting vitamin D, you're at higher risk of developing cancer. Or if you do have cancer, there's a lower chance that you will defeat it without intervention like chemo, which is going to kill all your good cells, right? Radiotherapy, which burns up all your good cells as well, right? All these factors are involved. So, you know, we have to look at when we detect it, right? What we're not doing on a daily basis that can increase our risk factors, and then the type of treatments that are available. So another thing to mention here as well is, in trying to prevent the cancer, when you eat a vegetarian, vegan, or you know, you eat a lot of fruits and all that, you actually reduce your risk by about 32%.
That's very significant.
That's right. That's 1 in 3 chance.
Even if you are cooking it, right? Obviously, you're not charring it. You're not going to be
charring, but I mean, when you cook vegetables and you know, when you eat fruits are raw most of the time. I mean, you got jackfruit and whatever. Now you can cook it up, but you're eating and you're getting natural enzymes because they're there. So the reduction is significant. That's 32%. So think about red meat. 33% increase with fruit, 32% decrease. So that's what, 65% swing if you're eating fruit to if you're eating red meat.
Red meats.
That's massive.
So there's a huge cultural thing here as well, right? You know, and black or white, because white people eat a lot of red meat as well. Well, probably more red meat. You talked about, you know,
but they eat it. They like to eat it rare.
Eat rare. I was going to go to that because
they like it bloody.
Yeah. And now they grill by all means, but when they have steak, it's usually senior, well done, flip it over, which we consider being rather more barbaric, right? Because like you're eating, you know, the blood in it.
Right.
Turns out that in actual fact we're probably overdoing it, right? And these are some of the cultural sort of awakening that needs to happen. Right.
So you need Karen to cook your red meat for you.
I mean, you need
I'm
Karen
trying to tell these men.
We just need
Karen, yo.
We just need to leave it alone. Period. We need to leave.
There's a reason.
No, but you need Karen, though.
You need Karen, bro.
You need Karen.
Don't
dismiss Karen.
Don't be that guy. So listen, guys. So we looked at some of the things we could be doing, or we should talk about some of the things we could be doing to help sort of protect ourselves, reduce the chances of us contracting CRC or colorectal cancer. of course, it's the things we need to eliminate, right? So
Right.
Again, we've tenderized the meat. We talk about the smoking, all forms of smoking, anything that burns, anything that chars and goes black and becomes, what's the word looking? I was say carbonated, obviously, but the carbon is released and it releases those charred and those toxins. We talked about the toxins in food. We talked recently about another cancer. I think you made another show and about the sugars.
Right,
the additives,
refined sugars,
the colours, the
preservatives.
The processed food.
These have an impact as well?
It ain't, as we say, it ain't food. It
right?
ain't food. So when you're eating substances that are not food, you're gonna, jack yourself up. I was gonna use the F word, but I'm gonna spare you guys.
So basically,
jack yourself up, yo.
So basically, we're going back. You're not getting any form of nutrition. Body's getting starved of minerals. Right, these are going to now make your organs work in a dysfunctional manner. They're going to be compromised, and these are going to show, and they're going to have signals or signs or symptoms in the body that we need to, start recognizing. And I think through the pandemic with COVID, I would hope or like to say that within our black community that we're becoming more health aware, health conscious, because we're at a disadvantage, right? We've just spoke about that. We're at a disadvantage financially, economically, resource. So what we got to do is be very mindful that what we are or what we do have or the accessibility to what we have is that we know exactly what we're intaking. And that's what we have to stress that so much that we as electric docs are trying to educate and to do that, And,
but there was something about specific in foods that people need to know. Like when you eat tomatoes, or tomatoes, I was getting there, right? There's a 50 to 60% reduction in colorectal cancer if you consume a lot of tomatoes.
Wow! Any particular type of tomatoes? Or
well, we like cherry, plum, Roma, heirloom tomatoes, right? So think about it, a 60% reduction in risk. So add that to if you're not eating red meat or eating red meat to if you eat tomatoes. Right?
It doesn't mean have a steak with tomatoes.
95%.
That's huge. So we need more. Crazy. So rather than rice and stew, we need some quinoa and stew, right? We're gonna go. We're gonna go.
We're gonna have vegetables and fruit, like Dr. said. Vegetables, fruits, other grains, like your millet, your quinoa, your wild black rice,
potatoes. So if you eat potatoes, right? There's two substances with potatoes, suberin and lignin, right? That actually absorb. If you happen to eat meat, let's say you eat meat, eat it with these potatoes, specifically purple or red potatoes. Eat them with the skin because it's in the skin. Suberin is in the skin of potatoes, so it's going to absorb the heterocyclic amines. Right, that you produce from cooking your red meat.
But we don't want to make people think that, okay, I can have a big plate of steak with a bunch of red potatoes, because the ratio of what is being digested or metabolized to what's being absorbed and that is not equal, is not balanced. What we're saying is, if you have, and let's be real.
Just for those people who do, we're saying don't eat red meat, but if you do, chow it down with tomatoes and some potatoes.
Or just have it under like 10 grams.
Tomato,
potato.
Make sure it's like 5 grams.
Meat and 2 veg, right?
Because usually people are having 20 grams of steak. Right? Bam, slap. Well, instead of 20, maybe cut it down to 10.
So, we talk about this, and I'm probably, jumping a little bit here, but, in terms of, when we discuss meal plans and food, we have this transition phase, right? Where we know full well that someone's been eating meat their whole life. They're not going to go cold turkey, and then the next day they're going to wake up and they're a plant-based, quote unquote, vegan, whatever. So, and that's part of it. I think a lot of people should be aware that, a lot of, points that the doctors are recommending isn't, hey, listen, if you can, hey, if you're that well disciplined to go cold turkey and stop eating meat tomorrow, then try it. But more realistically, start cutting down. So if you eat meat 3 times a day, you've got bacon at breakfast, you have a burger for lunch, and then you have a steak dinner, right? And then you do it again the next day, maybe include fish or whatever. Start cutting that down. Maybe one day, eat meat in 1 meal a day, then start to cut that down to, just a few times a week, and then maybe a few times a month. Before you know it, and you'll find things to substitute that as well. So listen, guys, I think the takeaway from this, I mean, you shouldn't have to wait for your doctor or the CDC to recommend when you should go and get a colorectal screening or endoscopy. Chadwick Boseman died at 43. He contracted the disease in his 30s. So those of you in your 30s, you're partying, you're drinking it up, listen, ask your doctor, recommend, listen, I'd like to go for a screening. I'm telling you, check. It's probably covered 100%. If you have insurance, it's probably covered because it's preventative screenings, right? And if it isn't covered, weigh it up. Sneakers, cancer. Knowing, not knowing, right? So I think we need to, you know, make the necessary changes as well to your lifestyle, right? Now, you know, let's work together to help eradicate this disease so we don't lose any more of our heroes in your family or otherwise, whether on the big screen or people you know. Right. Docs, closing comments, what do you want to add?
Stay electric, man. Stay electric.
Your food is your medicine.
Right.
Remember that. Your food is your medicine.
Absolutely. Well, folks, listen, Electric Docs TV, you're watching The Breakdown. Dr. Amun, Dr. Amsu, yours truly, Mr. Breaks. We'll see you on the flip side. Peace out. Oh, yeah, Wakanda.
There you go.
Hey, what's up, folks? It's Electric Docs right here. Dr. Amun, Dr. Amsu, yours truly at Mr. Breaks. Listen, we got another page we want you guys to go and follow. So go along to @Electric Docs.
@Electric Docs.
@Electric Docs.
@Electric Docs.
Follow now.
Follow that
@Electric Docs. Seen?
Follow now.
@Dr. Amsu too.
And don't forget Dr. Amun. _
@Dr. Amsu.
Electric Docs.
I work with these people.